This video is going to be on the SIG P320 X Carry CO2 blowback BB pistol and my quest for a lighter trigger pull. In the past, I've done 2 or 3 videos on this pistol, and my initial video when this pistol was first released, I really liked the pistol. The only thing I really did not care for was the heavy trigger pull. And shooting it since then, my like for the pistol, it's not like it was. I started to dislike the pistol more and more. I should say the more I shot it. So I said to myself, if I could just lighten this trigger pull, this actually would not be a bad pistol. Man, this video is basically me going into and showing you everything that I did to try to lighten the trigger pull on this pistol. My outcome with every attempt that I made, and how in the end, my opinion, SIG totally effed this pistol up. And when this pistol came to the table, whoever was in charge should have said, start over. But I digress. Let's get started. First, of course, you want to make sure, like with anything, it's empty. Yeah, I know, it's still an air pistol, but you don't want to get shot with it. It's empty. Next, we're going to remove the slide. Recoil spring. Here we're left with the chassis and the barrel frame. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to pull out the takedown lever. And we're then going to pull the chassis out of the frame. Basically lift up. There's the chassis. There's your frame. You know, just like the firearm. Set that aside. Now, where to begin? Well, first, let me sit this down and state that the problem with getting a lighter, or I should say, the problem with this trigger pull being so heavy, ranging anywhere from 6 to 12 pounds and up, is the fact that you have to overcome 5 springs. Yes, I said that correctly. The reason why this trigger pull is so heavy is you're overcoming, when you press this trigger pull, you have to overcome the pressure of 5 springs. Not 1 or 2 or 3, but 5. And that's why this trigger pull is so bad, and why it's almost impossible to get a lighter trigger pull. Now, I say that because I actually did get a lighter trigger pull. Now, that is without the magazine being installed. I actually was able to get this trigger pull to break at 4 pounds, 19 ounces. But with that comes some drawbacks, and I'll kind of go over that too. But next, what we're going to do is get our block here, punch, hammer, and we're going to knock out these 2 pins here. One. Two. When you knock those pins out, you're actually able to pull the barrel assembly and the trigger out of the chassis. But if you're going to do this, be careful because there is a spring for the slide stop, slide release. You don't want to lose, so I'm going to pull this up slowly. Make sure I'm doing this right. Yep. Come on. All right. Now, what's stopping it is the trigger bar. So to remove the trigger bar, we have to remove the spring here first, which is putting pressure on this trigger bar, which is one of the springs that you have to overcome. And we'll go into that a little bit more detail, but let me get that out of the way. After you remove that, you're able to pull the pin holding the trigger bar in the trigger. Once you do that, grab your little spring here, move that out the way, and then you can pull this whole assembly up out of the chassis. Again, being careful not to lose that little spring there, which is the spring for the slide stop, slide release. I'm going to go ahead and pull the pin out for that. It's on the opposite side. All right, there's a slide stop, slide release. Here is the barrel and trigger. Of course, the chassis with the sear and hammer back here. This part right here really isn't the issue, although you do have to overcome the tension of the spring, which is holding the, which releases the sear, but that's not really an issue. I'm going to show you basically the 5 springs that you have to overcome when you press this trigger. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to pull the trigger out of here, which is, take this punch. Well, I might not need a punch. Probably just pull it right out. Trigger pin. Trigger then comes out with the spring. And what we're left here is the, I guess the locking block or block and barrel. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you all 5 springs that I'm going to show you all 4 springs. The 5th one, of course, is in here. And I did not take this apart. It wasn't really necessary, because this is just a normal aspect of firing any gun, overcoming the sear spring. But again, this really isn't an issue. The issue is here, here, and believe it or not, here. And I'll explain. So first, to go over the 5 springs that you have to overcome. 1, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and remove it so you can see it. So although the trigger is not in this housing, you have a spring. Hopefully you can see that. that pushes the barrel back into place. So that's spring number 1. And that spring is located, see if I can get a good picture of it. That spring is located right there. And how I got the 4 pounds, 19 ounce trigger pull without the magazine in was by removing this spring, and as you can see, this is my trigger spring or trigger return spring. It actually came out this way and bent up, but you can see how I actually bent it backwards. Let me pull it out here some so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And there it is. There's a trigger spring. So you have to overcome 1, 2, 3, 4th one being back here, 5, 5th one being in the magazine. And that's why the trigger pull on this pistol is so bad that it actually makes the New York Glock trigger seem like a match trigger. I know it's kind of overstating it, but you kind of get the idea. So what I did, again, to get that lighter trigger pull was I bent this trigger spring to take the tension off of the trigger, and I removed this spring here. So there was no more tension on this barrel. So when you press the trigger, I'll put this back together so you can see how this works. I'm going to insert the trigger back in here like so. Take my pen. So right there, when you press this trigger, you're overcoming 2 springs. This one here and this one here. And even just doing that, it's already heavy enough. Then you have to overcome this spring here. And what this spring does is, and this is where one of the mistakes that SIG made, or they did it purposely. I don't know what you would want to call it, but to me it's a mistake, but they did it purposely, was this spring, find a screwdriver here, or pick. What it does is it pushes up from this area here. It pushes up right there to keep the rear of the trigger bar up so it can contact the sear. Now, personally, what they should have done was put a spring here that pushes up on this. That way you're not countering against this. You're not countering against this spring. And I'm going to put this back together so you can actually see exactly what I'm talking about. But again, they should have put a spring here instead. That way it pushes up on this trigger bar, but you're not fighting against the tension of it being here when you press the trigger. Once I put this back together, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And to make this easy, I'm going to put this back together without putting the slide stop in. So going to slide this back into place. Let me lift this up. Slide this back into place like so. Put that there. I'm going to put the pin back in place. Now I'm going to install the spring, or reinstall the spring, which goes such. It's kind of difficult to do this on camera. Come on. It's back in place. I'm going to have to slide it up a little bit. Come on. So here is the spring. It's coiled around this tab here. It's locked into this hole. And now it's pushing up against the trigger bar here. So I'm going to slide this back down. And as you see, when you press the trigger, you're actually working against that spring also. And like I said, the spring should have been here, so it's pushing up on this and not here. Now, I did bend this spring a little bit to take the tension off of it. But what happens when you do that is when you lessen the tension on this spring, this trigger bar does not always go up to hit the sear when you press the trigger. So a lot of times let me go ahead and pull this back, recock this hammer here. Come on. So a lot of times, now that it's ready to fire, I'm going to press the trigger. And already you can see, well, it's a heavy trigger pull. Just doing this, it's a heavy trigger pull. So right now you're fighting against, by doing that, you're fighting against 4 springs. Again, this one here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 springs just to press the trigger. Now, when you bring the magazine into this, I'm jumping ahead too fast. First, let me go back to this. So like I said, when I loosened this spring here, I basically bent this arm on this side to lighten the tension up. Yes, it made it a little lighter, but again, let me pull this hammer back. Okay, the hammer's cocked back. So what happens is, by that spring being here and not here, when you loosen the pressure on that spring, that trigger bar does not want to come back up like it should. And that's why I say they should have put a spring here that pushes up on it. And that way you would not have to fight against that spring there when you press the trigger. But of course, you are. Again, a mistake, design, I don't know who decided to do that, but it was horrible. Next, what I'm going to do is put this back into the frame. Yes, it doesn't have the slide lock release, but I don't have the pins in it anyway, so come on. I have BBs in this magazine to show you how by pressing the trigger, you're fighting against this magazine spring. I'm going to try to show that the best I can. So what happens is, the way they designed this, when you press this trigger, it's actually moving the barrel backwards onto, or to basically to place a BB into the barrel. Now, what happens is, when you press the trigger, the bottom portion of this barrel is actually pushing down on the BB, which is below the BB that's barrel level. I know it sounds confusing, but you have the top BB, the one that is to be loaded in the barrel. Then you have the one below that that's pushing up on it. For that BB to be loaded, this barrel has to push down on that BB there. And I'm going to show you that. Hopefully it's kind of blurry. Come on, zoom in. All right, I'm going to press the trigger, and you're going to watch that BB, not the top one, but the one right below it, get pushed down. You see that? Watch it again. And that's the fifth spring that you're fighting against. Now, or lastly, I should state, I'll go through basically what I did to lighten the trigger spring up and the negative outcomes I received from that. So first, one, I removed this spring. What that does is, the gun will fire, and it'll fire fine, but it makes the trigger return or reset really slow by removing this spring. So that was the negative side effect of removing spring number one. Spring number two, let me take this up a little bit, back up. Loosening this spring here, the tension on this spring here, caused the trigger bar to not reset as it should 100% of the time. Loosening, taking the tension off of spring number three, the trigger bar spring, or the trigger spring, that actually worked the best. That actually had no negative outcomes from bending this spring back. And it actually lightened the trigger up a little bit. But it didn't really help, because you're still fighting against, again, three other springs. Didn't touch this one back here, the silver spring. Didn't feel it was necessary. And then, of course, lastly, the magazine spring. And here's the magazine that does not have a spring in it, because, as you can see, I cut the spring to loosen the amount of tension that's being pushed up on the BBs. Did it make a difference? Yes. It actually lightened the trigger pull. The negative outcome from that was that by lightening the spring, you have less pressure pushing up on this tab here, which pushes up on the slide lock. So basically what happens is, by loosening this spring, you don't have enough tension to push up on this, so the pistol does not lock back on the last round. Anyway, I know that's a lot. I tried to go over it kind of quickly. I don't know how many people are actually interested in this, but I figured I'd make a video on my attempts of lightening the trigger pull on this. Was I able to do so? Yes. I actually got it down to 2 pounds. So from 6 pounds to 4 pounds without the magazine installed. But once you put the magazine back in there, it brings it back up to 8 pounds, 9 pounds. It's not even worth it. So my attempt of lightening the trigger pull on this pistol, yes, I succeeded and failed both at the same time. My thoughts on this pistol after disassembling it, seeing how it worked. Again, SIG effed this up big time. They really did. Probably not gonna like me saying that. Who knows? They probably won't even see the video. But yeah, they effed this pistol up. So, I guess to end this video, the SIG P320 X Carry. It's a fine pistol if you like having a really, 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 really heavy trigger pull. Nice break, heavy trigger pull. Other than that, yeah, tell SIG they effed up, and don't do that anymore. I mean, I know they're trying to make a pistol that doesn't fire on its own, and they succeeded. And you actually have to really want to press the trigger for this pistol to fire. And I don't know, you know, when it comes to a gun, a pistol, people basically state how good a pistol is based on how good the trigger pull is. And I guess SIG really didn't care with this pistol because they made a really heavy trigger pull that sucked. And with that, till next time. And thanks for watching. Yeah, auxiliary. That sucked.